All right, today we're going to be looking at some guitar tracks. I had a friend of mine record, and he was in the studio a few weeks ago putting these down. And when I got them, I wrote these parts specifically for him, knowing that he would be able to take it and just run with it, and he totally did. The thing about guitarists is that they're really excited to play guitar fast. And so when I wrote these fast parts, I knew that I was going to have to do a little bit of work um, on the other side of it to get things to really lay into place well. So for example, there's a metronome up here. You can hear the little click sound. And that's not the tempo of the track that we're working with right now, but you can get an idea for what that metronome sounds like. That's what I'm trying to get everything in this track lined up on. So that clicking sound is what we're going for, or the clicking sound is the metronome for getting everything to fall into place. Now, when I got these original guitar parts in, I dropped them in and noticed right away that there were just a few discrepancies rhythmically, and so I needed to use some of the built-in tools here in the suite to get things to lay into place properly. I've already messed with this first track, so I'll play this track down here, and you can get an idea for some of the discrepancies I'm talking about. So it's not bad. Obviously, there's a few transients in between the main hits, that are artifacts and things like that we're going to get rid of later down the line. But the first thing to notice is that by itself it sounds okay, right? By itself it's not noticeably off. But when you add it back to the rest of the mix, and I'll just add one track at a time to just show you what I'm talking about, you'll start to notice that things are a little out of whack. Right there. So you can hear how these are just not exactly laying in the beat the right way. And when you throw in the rest of the mix, things get even more off. The orchestra comes in here. So I've got everything else turned down because I'm really trying to focus in on this sound and how it lays on top of the mix. But you can get an idea for what I'm talking about when you add everything else back in, right? So you have all these other tracks playing on top of that or behind it or around it or whatever, but everything just sounds a little bit off. It's a little almost like phasing happening here. So what I'm going to do is jump into these tracks. I'm actually going to just focus on this first one that I played. And we're going to use something called FlexTime. Whoops. We're going to use something called FlexTime to, I don't know what's happening here, to really get in and mess around with this track. Okay, sorry about that. Got everything now on a new track here, and this is what we're going to be working with. I've got it set to analyze these transients, which are these hits in the waveform, and that's going to let me do some complex calculations here. I'm not going to do them. I'm going to have the computer do them, but it's going to tell me, exactly where these main hits are, and so that way I can actually take each of these little pieces and move it around, right? And so musically speaking, what we've got happening here is this da-da, which is kind of a 16th note riff, and it's not a grace note or a pickup note, which can kind of hang out in space on its own. It's actually rhythmically important to hear that da-da, downbeat, upbeat sort of feel for that polyrhythm that's happening with the other tracks. So what I can do here is, set this up as the beginning of the beat and move that over. Now what happens is it's getting a little bit cut off, and so that's not what we want. It's difficult to hear that because it's happening so fast, but what we need to do is look at our flex track options here, if I can find them. And we're going to do monophonic because that's what we're listening to is just a single sound, which is what the definition of monophonic means. So it's one instrument playing one note at a time. So we're moving these around, and by doing that, changing it to monophonic, it knows, okay, this isn't like a drum track where we can actually gate or duck out the in between the transients. This is going to need to be a consistent wave form throughout every note, if that makes sense. So you can see right here, this is happening before the beat. If measure 54 begins, we need this beat to happen right there. And we want that upbeat again to be right there on the first 16th note. Same thing here. This is a little bit early, just a touch. So I go through and just move these every single beat. It's a little time consuming, especially when you're working with a track like this one, where we've got just 1,000 16th notes happening here. But that's okay. That's my job. There it is. It disappeared. And there's some ways of algorithmically defining these transients and moving them around, quantization, that kind of thing. I've found that that works really well for the more rhythmic pieces or instruments. Even though this is a rhythm guitar playing a rhythm, the transients are a little less defined because of the nature of the instrument. So it helps to just go through and do it manually, and it doesn't take too long, especially if I'm just talking to myself as I do it. So once we get these kind of ironed out, I will play for you what we've done. And we'll see if it's starting to line up a little bit better. Is this the end? I think this is the end. This is where we start into 6/8 time. So the part there. Let's back out and see what we've got. So we're going to listen to this by itself. Let's see if it lines up with the metronome first. So far, so good. Let's see if it works well with this track here. Oops. I haven't gotten to the end of this one here. You can see my transients and FlexTime edits have been done up to about halfway. So I'm going to start at the beginning of this little piece and we'll see what happens. It's a little bit of a mess here in the beginning of this first one. I'm not sure what's going on there, but nothing we can't fix. Now that we've got a perfect rhythm down below, we've got something to kind of line it up with. So maybe we pull that over a little bit. Maybe we slide some of these just a touch and see if that kind of cleans us up. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe our transient's actually right there, not right there. So we'll try that and see if that sounds good. It's already a lot better. So that's pretty good. It's just a kind of a time-consuming, tedious process sometimes, but hey, that's the job, and it's fun.